State is one of 4 people on the shortlist for the role, with the successful candidate expected to be announced imminently. A letter sent to Interpol by the UK-based law firm Leverett Group on behalf of the Sandhurst states that its clients have strong grounds to believe that Mr. Nawa played a pivotal role in a conspiracy that led to their unlawful kidnap, detention, assault and attempted extortion in September 2022 when he was a deputy director in the Zambian CID. It says the Sandhursts were ambushed by assailants posing as duly authorized police officers and bundled into an unmarked van before being taken to a private residence in Lusaka, at which they were subject to threats and coercion before one of the captives managed to raise the alarm using a concealed mobile phone. Thereafter, they were transferred to a police station where they continued to be subject to threats and coercion by new kidnappers, assailants, and extortionists, including Mr. Nawa. The Sandhursts are owners of Sun Pharmaceuticals, a company that has awarded approximately 117 million Swiss francs by Zambia's Supreme Court for overpayment on a loan from the Development Bank of Zambia. The payment, which the government of Zambia bears responsibility for, has yet to be made. The letter says that since the judgment, the Sandhursts have been placed under extreme legal pressure to forego the payment by people close to the Zambian state, such as Mr. Nawa and his associates. It claims the Sandhursts have instituted legal proceedings against serving police officers and government officials for damages related to the September 2022 events, and the case is due to be heard in October this year, when Nawa will be a critical witness. In a statement, Zambia's police service said, "We categorically refute the malicious allegations. These accusations are entirely unfounded and are intended to tarnish Mr. Mobita Nawa's image ahead of the upcoming Interpol Secretary General elections." It said the Sandhursts were suspects in an investigation into the commission of fraud by allegedly altering the share structure of Sun Pharmaceuticals. It added their claims are fabricated and are a desperate attempt to distract from their criminal actions and evade justice in Zambia. These allegations are part of a calculated smear campaign to undermine Mr. Nawa's candidacy and damage his reputation. A spokesperson for the Sandhursts said in a response, "The Sandhursts have not fled the country. They stayed in Zambia for a year after their abduction, but are now out of Zambia because they are fearful of kidnap and violence from the syndicate trying to steal Sun Farmers' money. Warrants for the arrest have been served on the family or their lawyers." He said the court had dismissed the allegations made against the Sandhursts and that the Zambian Justice Ministry had acknowledged it owed 117 million Swiss francs to Sun Pharma. South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa warned of the dangers of toxic leadership in one of the world's most unequal countries after he was inaugurated for a second term as president, this time at the head of a coalition government with his African National Congress Party's biggest rival. The ANC lost its parliamentary majority in 29 May elections for the first time since Nelson Mandela led it to power in 1994 after apathy as millions of voters defected to breakaway parties amid chronic unemployment and the declining quality of public services. Last week, it agreed to govern with its former bitter rival, the pro-business Democratic Alliance, and 4 other smaller parties in what Ramaphosa has called a government of national unity. Left-wing parties that declined to join have said the government can more accurately be called a grand coalition and that it will reinforce the power of white monopoly capital. "We have made great strides in building a new society," Ramaphosa told an audience that included Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, King Mswati III of neighboring Eswatini in an amphitheater outside the government's union buildings in Pretoria. And yet, despite this progress, our society remains deeply unequal and highly polarized. There are toxic cleavages, often incipient social fragmentation that can only turn into instability. These still sharp divisions included those between black and white South Africans and people with jobs and the unemployed, Ramaphosa said. More than 4 in 10 South Africans are out of work and 30 years after the first fully democratic elections, the country's deep economic inequality still plays out largely along racial lines. The president will have to hold together a broad coalition. The DA has strongly criticized corruption under the ANC and is more in favor of free markets. It has campaigned against the more statist ANC's Economic Affirmative Action program and filed a court challenge against the National Health Insurance Bill that Ramaphosa signed into law 2 weeks before the election. The president has yet to appoint a cabinet, with the coalition statement of intent mandating that the allocation of ministries take into account member parties' share of parliamentary seats. The coalition currently had 6 members, 373 seats, the ANC said on Monday, with it holding 159 seats and the DA 87. South Korea is monitoring an expected change in the wind direction on Monday that could allow North Korea to send more trash-carrying balloons across their heavily armed border in their latest bout for tit-for-tat psychological warfare. Last week, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a major defense deal that observers worry could embolden Kim to direct more provocations at South Korea. That could include the launching of more huge balloons carrying rubbish towards South Korea in response to a South Korean civilian group's recent floating of balloons with anti-North Korean propaganda into the north. South Korea Joint Chief of Staff spokesperson Lee Sung-jun told reporters Monday that the military is closely monitoring North Korean moves because northerly or northwesterly winds favorable for North Korean balloon launches were forecast on Monday. North Korea launched a series of balloons that dropped manure, cigarette butts, waste batteries and vinyl in various parts of South Korea. No highly dangerous materials were found. North Korea said its balloon campaign was a tit-for-tat action against South Korea activists who flew political leaflets critical of its leadership across the border. Kim's influential sister, Kim Yo-jong, threatened Friday to retaliate after a South Korean group said it sent 20 balloons carrying 300,000 propaganda leaflets, 5,000 USB sticks with South Korean pop songs and TV dramas, and US $1 bills across the border the previous night. When you do something you were clearly warned not to do, it is only natural that you will find yourself dealing with something you didn't have to, Kim Yo-jong said, without saying whether North Korea would launch balloons again. The South Korean military didn't say how it would respond if North Korea conducts a new round of balloon launches. In reaction to North Korea's earlier balloon campaign, South Korea deployed gigantic loudspeakers on the border for the first time in 6 years and resumed anti-North Korean propaganda broadcasts. The broadcast reportedly included hits by K-pop sensation BTS, such as Butter and Dynamite, where they forecast a news on Samsung, the biggest South Korean company, as well as criticism of North Korea's missile program and its crackdown on foreign videos. North Korea views frontline South Korean broadcast and civilian leafleting campaigns as a grave provocation because it bans access to foreign news for most of its 26 million people. North Korea has reacted to past South Korean loudspeaker broadcasts and civilian balloon activities by firing rounds across the border, prompting South Korea to return fire, according to South Korea. No casualties were reported. Earlier Monday, South Korea, the United States and Japan issued a joint statement strongly condemning expanding and North Korea. It said the North Korean Russian moves should be of grave concern to efforts to peace on the Korean Peninsula, the global non-proliferation regime, and support the Ukrainian people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Sunday that the current phase of Hamas in Gaza is winding down, setting the stage for Israel to send more troops to its northern border to confront the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The comment threatened to further heighten the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah at a time when they appear to be moving closer to war. Netanyahu also signaled that there is no end in sight for the grinding war in Gaza. The Israeli leader said in a lengthy TV interview that while the army is closing to completing its current ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, that it would not mean the war against Hamas is over. But he said fewer troops would be needed in Gaza, freeing up forces to battle Hezbollah. Of transferring some of our forces north, and we will do that, he told Israel's Channel 14, a pro-Netanyahu TV channel, in an interview that was frequently interrupted by applause from the studio audience. First, for defense, he added, but also to allow tens of thousands of displaced Israelis to return home. The Iranian-backed Hezbollah began striking Israel almost immediately after Hamas's October 7 cross-border attack that triggered the Gaza war. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging fire since then, but the fighting has years of a full-blown war. Hezbollah is much and would raise the risk of a larger region-wide war involving other Iranian proxies and perhaps Iran itself that could cause heavy damage and mass casualties on both sides of the border. White House envoy Amos Hochstein was in the region last week meeting with officials in Israel and Lebanon in an effort to lower tensions, but the fighting has continued. Netanyahu said he hoped a diplomatic solution to the crisis could be found, but vowed to solve the problem in a different way if needed. We can fight on several fronts, and we are prepared to do that, he said. The deal would not just be an agreement on paper. He said it would require Hezbollah to be far from the border, an enforcement mechanism and the return of Israelis back to their homes. Shortly after the fighting erupted, not been able to go home. Hezbollah has said it will continue battling Israel until a ceasefire is reached in Gaza. The group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, warned Israel last week against launching a war, saying Hezbollah has new weapons and intelligence capabilities that could help it target more critical positions deeper inside Israel. Hezbollah already has unveiled new weapons during the low-level fighting, including hard drones that strike with little warning. An Israeli soldier was badly wounded Sunday in a drone strike. But Israel says it too has shown Hezbollah only a small part of its full capabilities, and that Lebanon will be turned into a second Gaza war. Israel's army last week said it had approved and validated a new plan for a Lebanon offensive. More than 1,300 people died during this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia as the faithful faced extreme high temperatures at Islamic holy sites in the Desert Kingdom. Saudi authorities announced Fahd bin Abdurrahman Al-Jalal said that 83% of the 1,301 fatalities were unauthorized, who walked long distances and soaring temperatures before the Hajj ritual and around the holy city of Mecca. Speaking with the state-owned TV, he said 95 pilgrims were being treated in hospitals, some of whom were airlifted for treatment in the capital yard. He said the identification process was because there were no identification documents with many of the dead pilgrims. He said the dead were buried in Mecca without giving a breakdown. The fatalities included more than 660 Egyptians, all but 31 of them were unauthorized pilgrims, according to two officials in Cairo. Egypt has revoked the licenses of 16 travel agencies that helped unauthorized pilgrims travel to Saudi Arabia, authorities said. The officials, who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to brief journalists, said most of the dead were reported at the emergency complex in Mecca's Al-Musaim neighborhood. Egypt sent more than 50,000 authorized pilgrims to Saudi Arabia this year. Saudi authorities cracked down on unauthorized pilgrims, expelling tens of thousands of people, but many, mostly Egyptians, managed to reach holy sites in and around Mecca, some on foot. Unlike authorized pilgrims, they had no hotels to return to escape the scorching heat. In a statement Saturday, Egypt's government said the 16 travel agencies failed to provide adequate services for pilgrims. It said those agencies illegally facilitated the travel of pilgrims to Saudi Arabia using visas that don't allow holders to travel to Mecca. The government also said officials from the companies have been referred to the public prosecutor for investigation. According to the state-owned press, some travel agencies and Hajj trip operators sold Saudi tourist visas to Egyptian Hajj hopefuls, violating Saudi regulations which require exclusive visas for pilgrims. Those agencies left pilgrims in limbo in Mecca and the holy sites in scorching heat, the newspaper said. The fatalities also included 165 pilgrims from Indonesia, 98 from India, and dozens more from Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, and Malaysia, according to a press tally. 2 U.S. citizens were also reported dead. The press could not confirm independently the causes of death, but some countries like Jordan and Tunisia blamed the soaring heat. AP journalists saw pilgrims fainting from the scorching heat, especially on the second and third day of the Hajj. Some vomited and collapsed. Historically, deaths are not uncommon at the Hajj, which has seen at times over 2 million people travel to Saudi Arabia for a 5-day pilgrimage. The pilgrimage's history has also seen deadly stampedes and epidemics. More than 15 police officers and several civilians, including an Orthodox priest, were killed by armed militants in Russia's southern Republic of Dagestan on Sunday, its governor Sergei Malikov said in a video statement early Monday. The gunmen opened fire on 2 Orthodox churches, a synagogue and a police post in 2 cities, according to the authorities. Russia's National Anti-Terrorist Committee described the attacks in the predominantly Muslim region with a history of armed insurgency as terrorist acts. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday were declared days of mourning in the region. Dagestan's Interior Ministry said a group of armed men shot at a synagogue and a church in the city of Derbent, located on the Caspian Sea. Both the church and the synagogue caught fire, according to state media. Almost simultaneously, reports appeared about an attack on a church and a traffic police post in the Dagestan capital, Makhachkala. Authorities announced a counter-terrorist operation in the region. The Anti-Terrorist Committee said 5 gunmen were eliminated. The governor said 6 bandits had been liquidated. The conflicting numbers couldn't be immediately reconciled, and it wasn't clear how many militants were involved in the attacks. There were no immediate claim of responsibility for the attacks. The authorities launched a criminal investigation on the charge of a terrorist act. Russian state news agency TASS cited law enforcement sources as saying that a Dagestani official was detained over his son's involvement in the attacks. Malikov said in the video statement that the situation in the region was under the control of the law enforcement and local authorities, and vowed that the investigation of the attacks will continue until all the sleeping cells of the militants are uncovered. He claimed, without providing evidence, that the attacks might have been prepared from abroad and referenced what the Kremlin calls the special military operation in Ukraine in an apparent attempt to link the attacks to it. In March, gunmen opened fire on a crowd at a concert hall in suburban Moscow, killing 145 people. An affiliate of the Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack, but Russian officials also sought to link Ukraine to the attack without providing any evidence. Kyiv has vehemently denied any involvement. Ukraine's top official for Europe says the war-torn country is on an irreversible course of Western integration after the European Union agreed to formally start entry negotiations this week. The decision to launch accession talks this week is a big day for her country, Olga Stefanishyna said. The Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration said, "This is the utmost will of the Ukrainian people, and this is the irreversibility. And you've seen Ukrainians stand up for their choice," Stefanishyna said, speaking in Kyiv on Sunday. It was her first interview since being appointed chief negotiator for EU accession. EU member countries agreed Friday to start entry talks with Ukraine and Moldova, overcoming vocal opposition from Hungary, which takes over the EU's rotating presidency on July 1st. The process of joining varies for each country, but it could take years. Turkey started its accession talks almost 2 decades ago and is still waiting for full membership. Stephanie Shia will head the opening of the accession talks in Luxembourg Tuesday, joined by several top government officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to give a speech at the launch ceremony, but Stephanie Shina did not elaborate whether he would do so in person or online. Zelensky described Friday's decision as a historic step, adding in an online post, "Generations of our people are realizing their European dream." Ukraine is returning to hope. A survey of opinion polling by the European Parliament earlier this year suggested that EU citizens broadly back Ukraine's membership bid but are less supportive of fast-tracking the process. Ukraine, Stephanie Shina said, was not seeking special treatment. Ukraine is moving fast, she said, without skipping any element of the process and without asking for any discount. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We return after this break.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what they blood.
I have fought a very firmly.
Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
People into the country illegally. That is amazing.
Honorable
you human
on the point of order.
Honorable
They are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. Argentina's self-described anarcho-capitalist President Javier Milei met with German officials on Sunday in Berlin, part of his ongoing lap of Europe, which has been greeted with both celebration and outrage. In a meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Sunday, the two leaders discussed Argentina's radical economic shifts and the importance of having critical minerals, likely Argentina's vast stores of lithium, used in the global energy transition, wrote Manuel Adroni, a spokesperson for Milei, in a statement on Sunday. The meeting between President Milei and Chancellor Scholz and their team showed two leaders with a convergent vision with the same principles and values in international politics and focused on solving key geopolitical challenges for the West, Adroni wrote. The German government said in a short statement Sunday the leaders spoke about the repercussions Milei's drastic economic cuts could have on Argentines and said Scholz reminded Milei of the importance of maintaining social cohesion while the leader attempts to control Argentina's sharp inflation. Also on the agenda was their sustained support for Ukraine and Israel, a trade agreement between the European Union and the countries of the Latin American Mercosur trade bloc, and concerns about democracy in the upcoming Venezuelan elections, according to Argentina's government. Center-left leaders called politics and style contrast sharply with those of the Argentine president. Milei, a right-wing figure known for his unfiltered way of speaking, was elected last year on the promise to fix Argentina's troubled economy and make Argentina great again. His austerity measures have fueled waves of mass protests in the South American nation, with protesters saying cuts have put the poor even more at risk and have endangered public universities. Milei has also drawn the ire of human rights activists after he called abortion murder and lambasted the country's feminist movement as a cult of a gender ideology. Scholz spokesperson Stefan Heverstreet said Friday it would be a very short working visit expressly at the wish of the Argentine president, and that there had been a clear refusal by Milei to hold a news conference, a greeting with military honors, and a joint news conference that the German government originally announced were later cancelled. The meeting came after Milei accepted an award from the neoliberal Augusto von Hayek Foundation in the German port city of Hamburg on Saturday for freeing the population from shackles and restoring hope. In a speech as he accepted the award, Milei declared that he was defeating the socialists with the largest fiscal adjustment in history of Argentina. He was met with chants of freedom in Spanish. Meanwhile, there were small protests outside both the award ceremony and the meeting between Milei and Scholz, with demonstrators carrying signs reading "Down with Milei," "Down with the far-right government," and "Argentina is not for sale" in Spanish and German. Rescuers in Switzerland have found the body of one of three people a day after they were swept away in a rock slide that hit their alpine village following massive thunderstorms and rainfall, authorities said Sunday. The two others are still missing. One woman was pulled out alive from the rubble earlier on Saturday morning. Today is a sad day, said Ignacio Cassis, member of the Swiss Federal Council, who addressed reporters Sunday after traveling to the region to show solidarity with the victims on behalf of the federal government. The man's body was found in a nearby river, authorities said. A team of 200 rescuers has been searching for the missing since Saturday with excavators, specially trained search dogs, drones and army helicopters. But the likelihood of finding them alive is low, William Clutter from the Swiss police, who is heading the rescue operations, told reporters Sunday. Such operations had to be halted during the night due to heavy rain. The rock slide hit a group of 3 houses in the municipality of Lostallo in the Alpine Valley of Mesox and Graubünden. Swiss authorities also said that a segment of the A13 motorway leading to Italy had been completely submerged and destroyed by flooding. The major transit route will likely remain closed between the key San Bernardino Pass and Riverdale for several months. Millions of Americans sweated through a scorching weekend as temperatures soared across the U.S. while residents were rescued from floodwaters that forced evacuations across the Midwest. One person was killed during flooding in South Dakota, the governor said. From the mid-Atlantic to Maine, across the Great Lakes region, and throughout the West to California, public officials cautioned residents about the dangers of excessive heat and humidity. At the borders of South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota, flood waters rose over several days. In northwest Iowa, 13 rivers flooded the area, said Eric Tiggs of Clay County Emergency Management. Entire neighbors and at least one entire town were evacuated, and the Iowa town of Spencer imposed a curfew Sunday for the second night in a row after flooding that surpassed the record in 1953. When the flood gauge is underwater, it is really high, Tiggs said at a news conference organized by Spencer officials. Governor Kim Reynolds declared a disaster for 21 counties in northern Iowa, including Sioux County. In a drone video posted by the local sheriff, no streets were visible, just roofs and treetops poking above the water. National Guard troops were helping with water rescues and transporting needed medications lost in flooding. Businesses are shuttered, main streets have been impacted, Reynolds said. Hospitals, nursing homes, and other care facilities were evacuated. Cities without power and some are without drinkable water. National Weather Service meteorologist Donna DeBacke said parts of northern Nebraska, southeastern South Dakota, southern Minnesota, and northwest Iowa received 8 times the typical average rainfall, and more heavy rain was expected this week. In South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem declared an emergency after severe flooding in the southeastern part. Several highways were closed. Areas south of Sioux Falls, the state's largest city, had an estimated 10 to 15 inches of rain over 3 days. National Weather Service hydrologist Kevin Lowe said. At least one person died in the floods, Noem said Sunday, without providing details. Several rivers, including the Big Sioux, James, and Vermillion, were expected to peak sometime Monday through Wednesday night, the governor said at a news conference. I want to remind everybody to remember the power of water and the flow of water and to stay away from flooded areas, Noem said. We've got a few days in front of us. Here that will be a little rough, but we'll get through it. Emergency management officials in the small South Dakota community of Dakota Dunes on Sunday issued a voluntary evacuation order for the area's roughly 4,000 residents. Dakota Dunes is near the Nebraska and Iowa borders and is sandwiched between the Missouri and Big Sioux rivers, both of which are expected to crest in the coming days. Emergency management in Dakota Dunes warned residents that a mandatory evacuation could come quickly if flood barriers are breached. Federal authorities offered a reward for information about those responsible for igniting a pair of New Mexico wildfires that killed 2 people and destroyed hundreds of homes in the past week. The FBI on Saturday offered up to $10,000 for information in connection with the South Fork Fire and Salt Fire in southern New Mexico, which forced thousands to flee. An agency statement said it was seeking public assistance in identifying the cause of the fires near Ruidoso, New Mexico, that were discovered June 17th. The notice also pointedly suggested human hands were to blame, saying the reward was for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for starting the fires. The South Fork Fire, which reached 26 square miles, was 26% contained on Saturday. The Salt Fire at 12 square miles was 7% contained as of Saturday morning, according to the National Interagency Fire Center. Full containment was not expected till July 15. Recent rains and cooler weather have assisted more than 1,000 firefighters working to contain the fires. Fire crews on Saturday took advantage of the temperatures in the 70s Fahrenheit, scattered showers and light winds used to bulldoze to dig protective lines. Hand crews used shovels in more rugged terrain to battle the fires near the mountain village of Ruidoso. Elsewhere in New Mexico, heavy rain and flash flood warnings prompted officials to order some mandatory evacuations. Friday in the city of Las Vegas, New Mexico, and communities near Albuquerque, about 200 miles north of Ruidoso. Las Vegas set up shelters for displaced residents, and some evacuation orders remained in place there on Saturday. Flash floods warnings were cancelled Saturday through the National Weather Service, said afternoon storms could produce excessive runoff and more flooding in the area. The wildfires have destroyed or damaged an estimated 1,400 structures. Other fallout from the fires, including downed power lines, damaged water, sewer and gas lines, flooding and burn scars, continue to pose risk to firefighters and the public, according to a Saturday update from the New Mexico Energy, Minerals and National Resource Department. Evacuation in areas near Ruidoso and road closures were still in effect. In Ruidoso, full-time residents will be allowed to return Monday, though everyday life won't return to normal. You are going to need to bring a week's worth of food. You are going to need to bring drinking water, Mayor Lane Crawford said on Facebook. President Joe Biden issued a disaster declaration for parts of southern New Mexico on Thursday, freeing up funding and more resources to help with recovery efforts, including temporary housing, low-cost loans to cover uninsured property, and other emergency work in Lincoln County and on lands belonging to the Mescalero Apache tribe. Dane Criswell, administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, met with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, Crawford and Mescalero Apache President Thurl Walsh Padilla said on Saturday. These communities have our support for as long as it takes to recover, Criswell posted on the social media platform X. The Albanese government is seeking to raise the pay for the incoming Governor General, Sam Mostyn, by more than $214,000, saying the change is appropriate because she is not receiving the same sort of additional pensions that previous office holders have enjoyed. Mostyn will be sworn into her new office on 1st July. Patrick Gorman, the Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister, introduced a bill into federal parliament on Monday morning which would raise the salary for the Governor General from $495,000 to $709. The Governor General's salary cannot be changed during their time in office, so the update must be approved by Parliament before next week and will set Mostyn's remuneration for her whole period of office, usually a 5-year appointment. In line with past practice, the proposed salary is calculated by reference to the estimated average salary of the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia over the national 5-year term of the appointment of the Governor General, Gorman said in her chamber. The same text is contained in the explanatory memorandum of the bill that was introduced, where in the past the Governor General has been the recipient of other Commonwealth entitlements, such as a military pension. The annual salary has been adjusted accordingly. Ms. Mostyn is not a recipient of any such entitlements, Gorman continued. Hurley, the former Chief of the Defense Force, received a military pension on top of his salary as Governor General. Other past Governors General have also received military or judicial pensions. The change represents a 43% pay rise in the legislated salary of the Governor General. Gorman said the change was to ensure the salary remained appropriate for the duration of this term. The figure was calculated to moderately exceed the expected average salary of the Chief Justice of the High Court over the notional 5-year term of the Governors General, said the bill's explanatory memorandum. The Chief Justice's current salary, as determined by the Remuneration Tribunal, is $649,880 per year. In 5 years, the Chief Justice's salary is expected to be in the order of $769,989, based on projected wages growth, with an average of over the period of $708,017. And that's the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. We brought to you stories from Zambia. Lawyers accuse candidate for Interpol chief of kidnapping. And from Saudi Arabia, more than 1,300 deaths occurred during 2024 pilgrimage. Then from Russia, militants kill scores of people, policemen in Dagestan. United States, temperature soars as floodwaters ravage other zones. Also from Australia, government to raise pay of Governor General. I am Valentina Lawrence. Thank you for watching. You can follow us on all our social media platforms if you missed any of our programs: X, formerly Twitter, Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok, Atlantic TV Network 1, or you can watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. You can also download our app, ATN Live, on Play Store. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Do not go nowhere. Business news comes up next.